The roar of the crowd is a physical thing. It's a wave of sound that hits you in the chest, a unified voice of tens of thousands of people screaming for their heroes. On Sunday afternoons across America, stadiums become modern-day coliseums. The men on the field are larger than life. They are warriors in polished helmets and bright uniforms, their names stitched onto their backs. We watch them perform feats of incredible strength and impossible speed. They are our gladiators, our Sunday gods, symbols of power and resilience. We cheer for every bone-crushing tackle, every spectacular catch, every hard-fought yard. These are the moments that make legends, the plays that will be replayed on highlight reels for years to come. These men are celebrated for their toughness. They are taught from a young age to play through the pain, to shake off a hit and get back in the huddle. A little dizziness is just part of the game. Getting your bell rung is a badge of honor, a sign that you are giving everything for the team, for the city, for the fans who adore you. The sport demands a sacrifice of the body. We see the torn ligaments, the broken bones, the sprained ankles. Those are the visible costs of a violent game. They are injuries that can be seen on an X-ray, treated with surgery and rehabbed with physical therapy. The players accept these risks. It is the price of glory, the toll for a chance to live a dream. But what about the injuries we cannot see? What happens inside the helmet, when one player's head smashes into another's? The brain, a soft, delicate organ, floats inside the hard skull. With every collision, it sloshes back and forth, hitting the bone. These small impacts happening over and over are the ones that don't make the injury report. They don't require stitches or a cast. The player might feel a little off, maybe see some stars, but he gets back up. He has to. The game moves on, and he cannot afford to be left behind. This is the silent toll, the unseen damage that accumulates play after play, season after season. For decades, we only saw the heroes. We saw the Super Bowl rings, the endorsement deals, the triumphant parades. We didn't see the quiet aftermath. We didn't know what happened when the lights of the stadium faded and the cheering stopped. The story of football was always about victory and legacy, but a darker story was unfolding in the quiet homes of retired players, a story of confusion, pain, and despair. A story about what happens when the game takes more than just a player's body. It's a story about the true hidden cost of America's favorite sport, a cost that was ignored for far too long. The invisible injury has a name. It is called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. The name sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Think of the brain as a soft bundle of wires. Repeated hits to the head, even small ones that don't cause a concussion, can damage these wires. Over time, a toxic protein called tau builds up in the brain. This buildup slowly strangles and kills brain cells. It is a progressive disease, meaning it gets worse over time, like a slow-motion train wreck happening inside the skull. The damage spreads, affecting parts of the brain that control memory, mood, and behavior. CTE is a storm that gathers silently for years, or even decades. The cause is not one big dramatic hit, it is the accumulation of thousands of smaller ones. It is the lineman crashing into his opponent on every single play. It is the running back lowering his head for extra yards. It is the linebacker delivering a punishing tackle. These are the routine impacts of football, the very essence of the game. For a long time, no one connected these everyday hits to the devastating changes happening in some players' minds later in life. The brain damage was invisible. It didn't show up on standard scans like MRIs or CT scans. You couldn't see it until it was too late. One of the most frightening things about CTE is that it can only be diagnosed after death. A doctor must slice the brain tissue and examine it under a microscope to see the telltale signs of the tau protein. This means that while a person is alive, they can only be suspected of having CTE. They might suffer from memory loss, confusion, depression, paranoia, and sudden bursts of rage, but there is no definitive test to confirm why. Families are left to watch their loved ones transform into strangers without understanding the biological disease driving the changes. This uncertainty makes it incredibly difficult for players and their families to get the help and support they desperately need. The statistics are shocking. A study from Boston University examined the brains of 111 deceased NFL players. They found CTE in 110 of them. That is 99%. While this study was based on a sample of brains that were donated because of concerns, the number is still staggering. It paints a terrifying picture of the risks involved in playing professional football. The game that gives these men fame and fortune can also plant a seed of destruction in their minds. The invisible injury, once dismissed and denied, is now a proven reality, forcing the entire sport to confront a crisis that threatens its very soul. Aaron Hernandez was a star. He was a gifted tight end for the New England Patriots, one of the most successful teams in the NFL. He had it all: a multi-million-dollar contract, a beautiful home, a young family, and the adoration of fans. On the field, he was a force of nature, big, fast, and aggressive. He played with a fire that made him a nightmare for opposing defenses. He was a key part of a powerful offense, catching touchdown passes from the legendary Tom Brady. To the outside world, Hernandez was living the American dream, a young man who had risen from a tough childhood to the pinnacle of professional sports. But behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. Hernandez's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and violent. There were reports of bar fights, angry outbursts, and a growing paranoia. He started carrying a gun everywhere he went. His friends and family noticed the changes, but they couldn't understand what was happening. In 2013, the dream turned into a nightmare. Hernandez was arrested for the murder of Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player who was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée. The news sent shockwaves through the sports world. How could a beloved NFL star be involved in such a brutal crime? Hernandez was convicted of murder in 2015 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His football career was over, his life in ruins. 2 years later in 2017, he was found dead in his prison cell, having taken his own life. He was only 27 years old. The tragic end to his story raised even more questions. What had gone so wrong? Why did a man who had everything throw it all away in a spiral of violence and self-destruction? The answers would come after his death, from a place no one could see while he was alive: his brain. After his death, Hernandez's family donated his brain to researchers at Boston University. The findings were stunning. Doctors discovered that Hernandez had the most severe case of CTE they had ever seen in someone so young. The disease had ravaged his frontal lobe, the part of the brain that controls judgment, impulse control, and emotional regulation. The damage was widespread and undeniable. Suddenly, his paranoia, his aggression, and his violent acts made a terrifying kind of sense. They were not just the actions of a bad man, but potentially the symptoms of a diseased brain. Aaron Hernandez became a chilling symbol of CTE's darkest potential. Philip Adams was not a superstar like Aaron Hernandez. He was a journeyman, a grinder. He played cornerback for 6 different NFL teams over a 6-year career. He was known as a quiet, thoughtful person, someone who was well liked by his teammates and coaches. He wasn't a household name, but he had achieved the dream of playing in the NFL, a feat that requires incredible talent and dedication. He played a tough position, one that involved countless collisions and head impacts. After his career ended in 2015, he struggled. He dealt with chronic pain and had trouble finding his way in life after football. His family noticed changes in him. He became more reclusive and his behavior grew more erratic. He was often in a state of mental anguish, but he kept much of his struggle to himself. His father later said that football messed him up. In April 2021, something inside Philip Adams snapped. He went to the home of a prominent doctor in his South Carolina hometown, Robert Leslie, and shot and killed the doctor, his wife, 2 of their grandchildren, and 2 men who were working at the house. After the horrific act, Adams fled to his parents' home nearby, where he later took his own life as police closed in. The community was left in a state of shock and disbelief. The violence was senseless and completely out of character for the man they thought they knew. Dr. Leslie was a beloved figure, a local doctor who had treated Adams in the past. There was no clear motive for the attack. The tragedy left 2 families shattered and a town searching for answers. How could a quiet, unassuming former football player commit such a monstrous act? Once again, the search for answers led to the invisible injury that had been silently growing in his brain for years. At his family's request, Adams's brain was examined for CTE. The results were tragically familiar. The coroner announced that he had unusually severe stage 2 CTE. The damage was especially bad in his frontal lobes, just like Aaron Hernandez. The doctor who performed the autopsy compared his brain pathology to that of Hernandez. The disease had been silently rewiring his mind, likely contributing to his paranoia, impulsive behavior, and ultimately, the violent outburst that ended 7 lives, including his own. Philip Adams' story is a heartbreaking reminder that CTE affects not just the famous stars, but also the everyday players who sacrifice their bodies for the game. Junior So was more than a football player, he was an icon. For 20 seasons he played linebacker with a passion and intensity that were unmatched. He was a hero in his hometown of San Diego, a beloved figure known for his infectious energy, his bone-jarring tackles, and his radiant smile. He was a 12-time Pro Bowl selection and a member of the NFL's 1990s All-Decade team. So was the ultimate warrior, the heart and soul of every team he played for. He was famous for playing through pain, for never taking a playoff. He was the embodiment of what fans loved about football: toughness, dedication, and a relentless will to win. After he retired in 2009, the man who was always smiling began to change. He became moody and distant. He suffered from insomnia and made impulsive business decisions that led to financial trouble. He showed signs of depression and memory loss. His friends and family were worried, but they couldn't pinpoint the problem. He rarely spoke about his struggles, keeping his pain hidden behind the same tough exterior he had shown on the football field. He was a proud man, a leader, and he didn't know how to ask for help. He was lost without the structure and adrenaline of the game. In May 2012, at the age of 43, Junior So shot himself in the chest. He left no note, but his method of suicide was eerily similar to that of other former football players who had suffered from brain trauma. By shooting himself in the chest, he preserved his brain, leaving it to be studied. It was his final, silent message to the world. He wanted his family, and the world, to know what was happening inside his head. His death was a seismic event in the NFL community. If this could happen to Junior So, the toughest, most vibrant player of his generation, then no one was safe. His family donated his brain to the National Institutes of Health for study. The researchers confirmed what many had suspected. Junior So had CTE. The disease had been quietly progressing, causing the cognitive and emotional decline that he had hidden so well. His death became a major turning point in the conversation about football and brain safety. It was no longer possible to ignore the connection. Xiao's tragic end forced the NFL, its players, and its fans to confront the devastating long-term consequences of the game they all loved. A hero's death became a wake-up call that could not be silenced. The deaths of legends like Junior So and the shocking stories of Aaron Hernandez and Philip Adams sent a clear and terrifying message to the National Football League. The problem of head trauma could no longer be swept under the rug. The league, facing immense pressure from former players, families, and the public, began to take action. It was a slow and often reluctant process, but change began to happen. The game itself started to evolve, with new rules designed to protect players from the most dangerous types of hits. The league banned helmet-to-helmet collisions and put strict penalties on players who lead with their heads when tackling. The equipment also started to get smarter. The old hard-shell helmets were designed to prevent skull fractures, but they did little to stop the brain from sloshing around inside. A new generation of helmets, developed with advanced technology and materials, is now being used across the league. These helmets are engineered to absorb and distribute the force of an impact more effectively, reducing the jarring motion of the brain. Companies are constantly innovating, using data from on-field sensors to design even safer headgear. While no helmet can completely eliminate the risk of brain injury, the technological advancements represent a significant step in the right direction. Perhaps the most significant change has come from the players themselves. A new generation of athletes is more aware of the long-term risks than ever before. They have seen what happened to the heroes who came before them. Some players are now making the difficult decision to walk away from the game in their prime, choosing their long-term health over a few more years of fame and fortune. Players like Chris Borland, a promising linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers, retired after just one season, citing concerns about head trauma. These decisions send a powerful message that a player's well-being is more important than any game. The culture of football is slowly shifting. The old play through anything mentality is being replaced by a greater emphasis on player safety and honesty. The league has implemented stricter concussion protocols, requiring players who show any signs of a head injury to be removed from the game and evaluated by independent doctors. There is more education for players, coaches, and medical staff about recognizing and managing concussions. The game is still violent, and the risks are still real, but the denial is fading. The fight to make football safer is underway, driven by the tragic stories of those who paid the ultimate price. The stories of Aaron Hernandez, Philip Adams, and Junior So are more than just tragic headlines. They are deeply human stories about loss, pain, and the devastating consequences of an invisible injury. They are cautionary tales that force us to look beyond the bright lights and cheering crowds of Sunday afternoons. They compel us to ask difficult questions about the sport we love. What is the true cost of our entertainment? And what do we owe the men who sacrifice their minds and bodies for the game? These are not easy questions, but we can no longer afford to ignore them. The silence has been broken by too many shattered lives. The first step toward a better future is honesty. The NFL, the players, the coaches, and the fans must all acknowledge the inherent dangers of football. We must continue to invest in research to better understand CTE, to find ways to diagnose it in living people, and to develop treatments that can slow or stop its progression. We must support the scientists and doctors who are working tirelessly to make the game safer. This means pushing for better technology, smarter rules, and a culture that prioritizes the health of the players above all else. The game can only survive if it proves it is willing to protect its own. We also have a responsibility to care for the players who are already suffering. Thousands of former players are living with the consequences of a lifetime of head trauma. They struggle with depression, memory loss, and a host of other debilitating symptoms. They need our compassion, not our judgment. We must create better support systems to help them and their families navigate the difficult road ahead. This includes providing access to quality medical care, mental health resources, and financial support. These men gave their all for the game. The game and its community must not abandon them when they need it most. The future of football is at a crossroads. It can choose to evolve, to adapt, and to become a safer sport, or it can risk becoming obsolete, deemed too dangerous for future generations to play. The choice seems clear. We must honor the memory of those we have lost by taking meaningful action. We must listen to the stories of the families left behind. Let us build a future where young athletes can chase their dreams without sacrificing their minds. Let us work toward a day when the roar of the crowd does not echo with the silent cost of hidden injuries, but with the celebration of a game that is as safe as it is thrilling.